Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Infinite Danger Room. We've got a bat-tastic episode planned for you today as we talk about our favorite live-action Batmans and probably some other Bat topics as we go through the show today. We have a pretty full podcast crew on hand. We've got Anthony Brown, we've got Kade Poulson, we got Matt Howlett, we got Chris Borthick, and I'm Matthew Price. We're here for the next half hour or so to talk to you about Batman. All right. Matt, you have kind of a big list of who has played Batman in live action since the 40s. Do you want to talk, just kind of give us the list, maybe the films they were in, and then we can go from there and kind of talk about, I don't know, we could even rank our top 5 or so out of once you give us the full list. So.
Sure. So these are people who have either played Batman or Bruce Wayne in a live action film or television show. Starting in 1943 was Lewis Wilson, who was the first live-action actor to play Batman. Then in 1949, we had Robert Lowry, who played Batman in Batman and Robin.
Those are both serials.
Then we bump up to, I guess, was it 1966, when we had Adam West as Batman. And we really didn't have another live-action Batman until 1989 when we got Michael Keaton in the film Batman. Mm-hmm. Which then we had Batman Returns, which I think came out in 1991, 92?
Yeah, I can't remember. 92 for Batman Returns.
Then Batman Forever in 95, and Batman and Robin in 97, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And I didn't write these down, so I'm just going off of memory.
Yeah, so Val Kilmer for
Val Kilmer, Batman Forever, George Clooney, Batman and Robin, 97, and then it would be 2004 when we would get Christian Bale in Batman Begins, followed by...
No, I'm just making hand signals. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Who then portrayed the character in 2008 in The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises in 2012. And then we didn't get another Batman until Batman vs. Superman with Ben Affleck, who played Batman also in Suicide Squad and Justice League. And while those movies were coming out, we also had David Mazouz. Is that how you pronounce his name? In Gotham?
So. Mazouz.
Plays basically a child version of Bruce Wayne. And
there is a kid who played Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And there's a kid who plays Bruce Wayne in Batman vs. Superman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to make our favorites,
prevalent characters.
But just for purposes of completeness.
True. That is true.
I would say maybe those scenes couldn't have been longer than combined a minute. Maybe the kid in Batman Begins had a little bit more story time.
He had more story time.
But
sure. It's okay. We're not.
I was just pointing out, for completeness' sake, there might be a couple other Bruce Waynes out there that didn't specifically play Batman.
It's okay, Matt. It'll be okay.
Oh yeah, the kid. And now that I think about it, the kid in Batman Begins is my favorite Batman.
Good.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot. Honorable mention, and because I've said this, I've asked other people this list before, and everyone says, "Oh, Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy's the best Batman." We're talking about live action Batman. Otherwise, Kevin Conroy would be number one on everyone's list in this room. So I just want to get that out there because everyone always likes to say, "Oh, the best Batman is Kevin Conroy."
All right. So we're gonna maybe give our top 5. Do we want to go around and go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? What do you think?
Sure.
That's
fine.
All right, Chris, why don't you start with your number 5?
My number 5 is the very classic Adam West. It was this campy version of Batman, which I loved as a kid, sort of. And when I was getting into serious Batman comics, I didn't care for him as much, and now I've come back to really just appreciate him for what he did. I mean, he kept Batman alive during a tough time for comics. So, Adam West, so much fun, great guy, and got some good animated movies out of him before he passed away.
Okay, so I'm going with my
number 5.
My number 5. Oh, okay, I only did a top 4.
Let me throw one more on there.
George Clooney.
Man. Oh man.
The Derailer! The Derailer strikes!
I actually regret saying that, but I'm going to go with it.
I think I threw up my mouth a little bit.
Okay, this is why I picked George Clooney. When I was a kid, and I was the perfect child age for the Batman movies, I was before 10 years old, I'd seen all these movies, loved them all. I don't think I was aware how bad Batman Forever and Batman and Robin were until I got older. But I do remember seeing Batman and Robin as a child and being so excited that we got a Batman movie that has Robin and Batgirl in it. And as far as villains go, we got a Poison Ivy, Bane, and some other character I don't remember.
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze, that's right. I just enjoy the campiness of it. I grew up watching reruns of Batman and Robin, and I loved how in Batman and Robin it wasn't uncommon that you would see Joker or Catwoman. I guess they had Mr. Freeze in those as well. Riddler, and I just enjoyed seeing lots of villains. I guess it's the same feeling that I would get when I watch Avengers, when I see all the characters come to one movie and you see them all, the dynamics. We don't really ever get that again in any Batman movie since, with the exception of Justice League. So that's why I liked the George Clooney Batman. However, that was a last second pick because I only did a top 4. I didn't realize we were doing top 5. So that's all I have to say.
My number 5 pick is Adam West. I watched Adam West in the 66 series when I was a kid. I loved it. I thought it was fun. As I've gotten older and read more comics on Batman, I do think that Batman is more of a detective, more relatable human type character, and the Batman 66 show was just fun. It was very cartoony. So I think that it's good for what it was, and I think Adam West did a good job in it, but it's not my Batman, so I would say that Adam West is my number 5 choice, just because he was fun, and it was enjoyable when I was a child. I loved it.
For me, at number 5, I'm going to put Val Kilmer. I wanted to go off the board, but we were only going live action. I was going to pull Will Arnett as the Lego Batman in there, but I enjoyed the Batman movie he was in, Batman Forever. It wasn't as absurd as some of the ones to follow, like the ones with George Clooney. But, he worked as Batman at the time. But as the movies have aged, some of the characters have done, or some of the actors in comparison have done better and worse. And so for me, Val Kilmer stacks up as number 5.
To add to what you said, I think Val Kilmer is the best Bruce Wayne. In a lot of ways, if you think about him outside of the mask.
Right.
So I respect that one for
sure. So I actually have watched these serials, and I debated throwing one of those guys on there just because, one of them originated the role, the other one was the first one to kind of do kind of a more watchable version. But as it came down to it, I'm gonna give it to our man Ben, our boy Ben Affleck at number 5. I don't, as much heat as he takes, I don't think the problem with those Batman films that he's in is him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's the problem. I think there's probably a great Batman movie that could have been made with Ben Affleck. I don't know that we're ever going to see it now. But I don't think he's the problem. I think he brings a certain world weariness to a certain version of Batman that's maybe kind of getting close to what you got in Dark Knight Returns. So maybe a Batman that's just a few years away from that. So while everything didn't work about the films he was in, I don't blame him for how those films played out, and so I put him at number 5.
Okay.
All right,
Number 4.
Yes.
So number 4, I actually go with Val Kilmer for my number 4. I liked him as Batman. One of the things I liked about the Batman Forever was especially the opening was very reminiscent of James Bond, where it's this complete action open where Batman's trying to thwart a robbery by Two-Face, and it's just very memorable. I think that all of his Batman stuff is pretty interesting during that movie. I'm not a huge fan of him as Bruce Wayne. I feel like he's almost too fake at points, even to me. But I still like him. But again, Val Kilmer would be my 4th.
Matt?
I do agree that scene where they're fighting Two-Face, there was no introduction of Two-Face. He's just Two-Face and he's fighting Batman. Yeah. And I do like when movies kind of start out like that. But as far as my number 4 goes, I'm going to go with Adam West. Essentially for the same reasons that Kade mentioned. It was campy, funny. I don't really feel that he portrays the best Bruce Wayne, but as far as what I enjoy about Batman, he brings it to the table. Going back to watching those episodes, like I mentioned before, I just like seeing the episodes where or even in the film where you see multiple villains teaming up together. You get that huge crossover feel that you really don't see outside of that movie and Batman and Robin and Justice League. So that's why I like.
Okay.
My number 4 is Ben Affleck. I thought he looked great in the Batsuit. I was never completely convinced of his Bruce Wayne. I think he's an okay actor. I don't really have any problem with him. I thought he did fine for what he was supposed to do in the movies, and that was to bring the Justice League together eventually. But I didn't really enjoy how his character was written. I think there are problems with the Bruce Wayne Batman character in those movies. He was very rash. He didn't think things through. And none of that is Ben Affleck's fault, just like Matt said. That was, I think, some of the writing for the character in the movies. But Ben Affleck, I feel like he just wasn't as convincing to me as a Bruce Wayne. I feel like I looked at him and I saw Ben Affleck because he's been in a ton of movies. I thought he did an all right job acting. I don't think he is going to maybe win an Oscar for acting ever. And I think that's why he's my number 4.
So for me, Affleck came in at number 4 as well. I think part of the problem that Ben Affleck had going into the Superman Batman movies were the preconceived notions and that Daredevil movie that's on his resume. So when people heard that he was going to be Batman, he had to come out with his quote that said, I've dealt with crap in the past, except it was more fruity language. But I think that he did okay, and he was better in the Justice League movie than he was in some of his other appearances, especially in Superman Batman. So I rate him a little bit higher because there's also a greater degree of difficulty. I wonder if we would criticize the Superman Batman movie as much if the Marvel movies didn't exist. Because the Batman movies were around and lived in their own space, and good or bad, everyone still went and saw the George Clooney Batmans because it was a Batman movie and everyone loved Batman. But now that, he was the first guy to play Batman after Christian Bale in that excellent series, he had to be the man to replace the man, but you always want to be the man that follows the man that replaces the man. And so I think that
Nice.
he had some of that to combat. And so I didn't want to downgrade him on that part. So I feel like, coming in at number 4 for me is Ben Affleck, and I feel like he did an admirable job. Once the script got better, he got better as well.
Okay, so this is my number 4.
Yep.
Val Kilmer. And I think if we'd seen him do the part more than once, we might rate him higher. Because I think he had the right chin for the job.
Definitely.
I think he does at least in the film he did, a very exciting, athletic Batman. He had pretty good chemistry with Chris O'Donnell. Mm-hmm. He looks good in the suit. He's solid as Bruce Wayne. His hair is a little lighter than what you maybe expect, but that's, pretty minor point as far as your Batman's. I think he's just sort of trapped in a movie that doesn't quite know what it is. And so, for me, that's probably the problem. He and the director didn't really get along, from what I understand, and that's why he wasn't asked back for the next one, or whoever asked to, but you know what I mean? He just did the one. I think in an alternate universe where you got maybe 2 or 3 Val Kilmer Batman movies in the 90s, you might rate him higher. Yeah. Depending on what they did with it. Because I think he probably could have threaded the needle between dark and silly. Mm-hmm. I think that's always kind of the battle with Batman is, for mass consumption, how dark do we want to make this and still sell toys and Happy Meal with them, you got the very dark Batman Returns, which is, a pretty good Tim Burton movie. We may talk about this later as we get into other characters here. But they said, well, go lighter because we're trying to sell toys. So they go to the Batman Forever, and then it kind of swings even further And they're like, no, too much, and you come back. So I think Batman in the public eye is always sort of swinging between he's a character to sell toys, that's got action and a little bit of drama, to he's a character of great drama and pathos who has a lot of darkness. And so you're always kind of swinging in between there. And I think Val Kilmer had all the stars aligned, maybe could have done 2 or 3 movies kind of right down the middle there, and we might have remembered him even better. As it is, I'm going to rank him at number 4, but I enjoy his performance in what's kind of an uneven movie, but he makes it pretty watchable for the most part. So that's where I'm at on number 4.
All right. Well, my number 3 is actually Ben Affleck. I like Matt, don't blame him for any of the script mess that I feel like is really all Zack Snyder's fault. As far as his premiere in the Batman versus Superman, I liked when he was showing up and they were not doing their crazy fight at the end. I mean, I liked all of his appearances in the movie up to that point. I love his cameo in Suicide Squad. I think both of those are fantastic, both with Deadshot and with Amanda Waller at the end. And I like him pretty well in Justice League. I feel like the struggle with his Batman is that he's it's an uneven character for him, in that it's like he's really old and bitter, I guess, in Batman, and Superman and world weary, and then he's kind of on this weird road to redemption through Justice League, and it's an interesting arc. But I mean, I think he does well as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I think he looks really good in the Batman suit. They've done a great job with that. So.
He's Captain Murtaugh Batman. Like, I'm too old for this crap.
Right. Too old for this crap.
Matt Howlett.
All right, so my number 3 is also Ben Affleck. For the reasons, essentially what you said. You didn't mention that he also fought Harley Quinn and Joker in Suicide Squad briefly.
Right.
Oh, which was a cool
That's
scene.
right. That's
They
a great
were
scene.
probably not even in the same room when they did those scenes. But speaking about being in the same room during scenes, Chris O'Donnell said when they filmed Batman and Robin, he was never in the same room as Arnold Schwarzenegger during that entire film.
Wow.
That it was all through edits and stunt doubles.
Don't derail us.
That's a good point. It has nothing to do with Ben Affleck.
We're back.
I just want to talk about that.
Gotcha.
I don't want to derail. I just want to say
Speaking of Ben Affleck, did you know that Chris O'Donnell said?
Okay, the things that I didn't like about Ben Affleck, I think I agree with everyone at the table. It was probably the writing of the movies. The things I liked about him, it seemed like he had more gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
Not as many gadgets as another Batman that I'm going to mention later in the podcast, but there were more Batman gadgets. They looked like they were ripped from the comic books.
And to add on, to tack on to that, also that fight scene where he rescues Martha Kent,
Yes,
is the best Batman fight scene, I think, on film.
absolutely,
So-
absolutely. I wish that we would have gotten something like that in Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
The way they introduced all the characters in Justice League was great, except for Batman's. I feel like that was really a rip off of another. Was it Justice League #1 from
Justice
Jeff
League War,
Johns?
yeah.
That was essentially that was basically what they were kind of recreating.
Yeah.
So I guess I've just seen that, done that, kind of feel about that. So that was my complaint there. But that's my number 3. So Ben Affleck.
So my number 3 is Val Kilmer. I thought that he brought a better balance between Batman and Bruce Wayne. I think that he was probably the most suave out of all of the Bruce Waynes. And I believe, I could be mistaken on this, but I had heard that Bob Kane actually always wanted Val Kilmer to play Batman and Bruce Wayne. That was his top choice ever since they decided they were going to make a Batman movie. And even when Michael Keaton was cast initially with the first Batman feature film in 1989. But I enjoyed Val Kilmer. I've always thought that he was a great actor. I thought he did fine for what the movie was in Batman Forever. Once again, looking back at it, the issues that I do have with that movie, I don't think those are Val Kilmer's fault. I think he is a better actor overall, especially in his prime, than Ben Affleck. I think that he maybe doesn't fill out the suit as well as Ben Affleck, but I thought he was a better Bruce Wayne, and that's why he comes in at my number 3.
If you watch Top Gun, man, Iceman is jacked.
Iceman. Yep, he is.
All right, what do you got, Anthony?
For me, I've got Adam West, and it has a lot to do with the cultural significance of Adam West, because the series itself, it was kind of hokey and campy, and any other adjective that you want to use to describe it along those lines. However, when the phone rings, it's like, hey, the hotline, the bat phone, the red phone, and even the fact that they went back and made other movies and played up off of the silliness and things like that, and just the fact that Adam West enjoyed the role so much that he kept reprising it and he even though he did other things after that, he was Batman and he was proud to be Batman, and even though there were other actors before that, he kind of is seen as the first Batman. And so when he passed last year, there was a lot of tears and things like that, because it was your parents' first Batman, or the people's Batman that passed away. And so he held the title and carried the torch for such a long time. And he made it cool to want to dress up and be Batman, because a lot of people that are my parents' age or older or somewhere in that vein, saw him and played as him and played as Robin and did that. But he also got to play alongside great actors like Eartha Kitt as Catwoman. And so, there was a lot to enjoy in the series besides the silliness. And, there are things that are in that series that you see replicated in other TV shows as well. So for me, Adam West comes in at number 3 more for the cultural significance about it than maybe his acting chops and the roles that he portrayed in it.
And I like how you mentioned that he was Batman throughout the 70s and early 80s, because he was in Challenge of the Super Friends.
Yeah,
he did
exactly.
Batman. He wasn't always Batman in the Super Friends show.
No, but there was a season where he was, I believe, and there was a Batman solo series.
Yeah.
And there was that Challenge of the Super Friends live action thing that he played Batman. So he was continually suiting up or voicing up as Batman really up until the mid 80s, I think. So that's 20 years almost. Okay, my number 3. Here's a shock the fandom. I'm gonna put at number 3 Christian Bale, who is, I'm sure, will show up many times on these lists. There's a version of me that would argue for him at 1, but I'm kind of doing this list based more on, I don't know, my feeling about impact at the time. And I think Christian Bale did kind of right the ship for Batman and did a really good trilogy with Christopher Nolan. And I think if you want to argue he's the best Bruce Wayne and the best Batman, that's pretty arguable. I mean, you can make that argument pretty strongly. But I don't know that he had the cultural impact of the people that I'm going to put ahead of him.
Okay.
So that's why I'm going to put him at 3rd.
Well, my number 2 is actually Michael Keaton. Our first big film Batman back in the day with Tim Burton, and I remember him as much as Ben Affleck was controversial. Michael Keaton was really controversial because he was pretty much a comedic actor, except for one movie, Clean and Sober, which he played a serious version in. So, he's got this great quirky version of Bruce Wayne that you just really don't ever see, but sort of captures that old absent-minded feel of Bruce Wayne, just like randomly giving people money, that sort of thing. And he's just a really good actor, I think. And plus, I think you got to give him props because Tim Burton has a very distinct world style in all of his films, and that's got to be both fun and challenging to work in, because that's a definite vision. And he did really well with the fact that he couldn't turn his head, so it's also good. But great version of Batman. I mean, the Batmobile and all of his gadgets are so much fun, and he got to play opposite of Jack Nicholson's Joker, which is phenomenal. So,
what was the first movie where Batman could turn his head? Batman or The Dark Knight?
Yeah,
Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Probably. It's crazy to think about.
I know.
Well, could he turn his head in the 66 Batman?
Yeah. Because it's just a
It was the kind of I would say like the relaunch.
It was just funny. I remember that being like, it was just like that he had to turn his whole body.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I just remembered there was a Batman we didn't mention. Pete Holmes plays Batman in the Funny or Die sketches.
Huh?
Yeah.
Batman,
not licensed, maybe.
Not licensed.
There is someone who you could also mention who kind of plays both Batman and the Joker, and that's Prince.
Oh, there you go.
in the various videos for Party Man and Bat Dance, and
That's funny.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Okay.
he's half Batman, half Joker.
Batman, half Joker.
Just wanted to throw that out. So,
All right.
Bad Man.
So my number 2 is I'm gonna go with Christian Bale for my number 2, and there's a reason why I pick him as my number 2, even though I think that he is very, very high up on the list, and it was almost a coin flip between Christian Bale and the number 1 pick. I love his portrayals, Batman and Bruce Wayne. I love over the trilogy of the Dark Knight movies, we see him grow into the role of Batman. We never really seen that. We never really learned how Bruce Wayne became a combat expert. We never really seen how he got access to all his gadgets and technology. The Dark Knight trilogy really gives a very logical, clear explanation of why he has that. His father had tons of money invested in his defense contracting company and had access to all these military-grade weapons that just sat in warehouses because no one really needed to use those. I love that. What I don't really like about his portrayal of Batman is that I feel like if you didn't call him Batman, you just called him Super Spy, the movie would be there would be nothing different about those movies. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be Batman in those movies. He could just be a billionaire playboy who uses technology to fight crime. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's nothing really distinctive about him being Batman other than calling Bruce Wayne, with the exception of like his relationship with Alfred. But that's just kind of been always my takeaway from it. It's just a Mission Impossible kind of movie for the most part to me. Born Identity, something like that. But that's not a dig at it though, because that's kind of what makes it interesting too. So that's my number 2.
All right.
I'm gonna have to agree with Matt. My number 2 is Christian Bale. I think he has a lot of advantages because he had Chris Nolan working with him and Jonathan Nolan. He was in the best Batman movies. I think he was the best Bruce Wayne overall. I think that he's just the second best Batman, and that's largely due to what Matt just said. He's kind of like a special covert ops guy who's a rogue vigilante billionaire. That's just who Batman is in general. But at the same time, it was kind of like a real world take of, if Batman existed, this is probably what he would actually be like. There wouldn't be superheroes in that world. Batman is human, so this is something that could possibly actually happen, unlike a Superman or a Spider-Man or something like that. So I think that Chris Nolan did a good job of having that real world take, but I think that Christian Bale also benefits from Chris Nolan being at the helm of this, and that's why those movies are so great. I really don't have many issues with his take on Batman. I know a big critique of him was the voice. A lot of people hated the Batman voice that Christian Bale had. They should have gotten him some sort of voice modulator, because I remember Christian Bale went on one of the late night TV shows, and he said that everybody always requested him to do the Batman voice, and he said, "I can't do it. It hurts my voice too much." He said, "I just can't do it." And so I think that was rough on him. They should have got the voice modulator like they did with Ben Affleck. That probably would have saved his throat a little bit and been less goofy. But he was a great Batman, and he was, I think, the best Bruce Wayne. But I think that Bruce Wayne and Batman are kind of two very different people. And in the Chris Nolan movies, they were just kind of one. I think that this character is really kind of be a sociopath, where his true identity is Batman, and Bruce Wayne is his mask. And I feel like Christian Bale in these movies was really just Bruce Wayne doing his thing. So that's why he comes in at my number 2.
Anthony.
For me, number 2 is Michael Keaton. I enjoyed Batman. I enjoyed his Batman in the first one and in the second one. And I remember just like how insanely popular that movie was, and he was, and people were getting Batman cut in the back of their head, and like Taco Bell had the Batman promotion, and just everything that came along with it, and it just played up into the movie. I was really young when it came out. Don't want to give away my age, but I remember seeing it and loving it and being in love. I like the fight with the Joker and the Joker's big long gun and how he shoots the plane out of the air. Just you can see him going through the trials and tribulations of being Batman. And just, I mean, it was just a good movie. It has great replay value as well, in that you can go back and watch it and be like, well, yeah, this is from the 90s, but even in the comic books, it's like, well, Batman doesn't really have a lot of technology hanging around his mansion, so when he's there in the mansion, it's just like, well, yeah, I can see all of the Batmen living here and hanging out here and, doing that, so that's why it has so much replay value. But Keaton was great, and he was grizzled, and, he was funny at times, and, he brought a lot to the table as Batman, and I really enjoyed his version of it.
Michael Keaton is also number 2 on my list. That film is a cultural juggernaut that's probably hard to explain if you didn't live through it. I don't know that as much as movies are hyped and played up now, and as big as the Marvel movies are, I don't know that you just see a movie sweep across like the entire populace like that, where,
right.
I mean, you would go into like 7-Eleven and there'd be Batman yo-yos. I mean, there was just Batman stuff everywhere, in every store that was out there. It was just massive. Whoops, I'm knocking stuff over. It was so massive. And and so that's part of it. And I think Michael Keaton, once he's in the role, Burton does a very specific type of movie. And I think he was more interested in saying, okay, what kind of world has to exist and what kind of man has to exist in that world for Batman to make sense? Because, I mean, as much as Nolan later kind of grounded it, if you got to think, okay, your parents were killed, you're really upset about crime, we need to make this a logical conclusion that you will dress up like a bat and fight people forever, which for most people is not what they, well, maybe I'll found a nonprofit, or, maybe, I mean, there's many different things you'd probably do.
Yeah.
So Burton, rather than grounding it in the real world like Nolan would do decades later, says, let's create a world where that's almost a reasonable conclusion for this guy to draw. And also let's show that he's a little off kilter, but so many things in this world are a little off kilter that you can see how he gets to like, no, okay, I'm going to dress up as a giant bat, and that's going to be a logical conclusion to what has happened to me. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think those movies are great. And, I mean, specifically the first one had a huge cultural impact. And so that's where I land Michael Keaton at number 2. Right. So I think we're coming around to number 1 for me, Chris.
So my number 1 is going to be Christian Bale. I agree with everybody's statements about him. I think for the most part, for me, he's been the best combo of Batman and Bruce Wayne. I really like the fact that he's a very realistic Batman. I really like all of his supporting cast, and I mean, and we can say, as far as like cultural significance, etc. For me, he kind of brought Batman back after the atrocity that is Batman and Robin. I mean, that's to me the big significance for him. And he has some great versions of some classic characters. I mean, Ra's al Ghul, who knew he was going to be the villain in number 1? You had one of the craziest versions of the Joker we've ever seen on screen, who was amazing. Catwoman, a Bane that was not ridiculous, a la Batman and Robin. I mean, and he's just an interesting character, and he benefits from having Christopher Nolan, but I mean, I think he's a great actor. I've seen him in a lot of different stuff. He's very into whatever role he gets into. He really dives deep, which sometimes is to his detriment, but to me, he's just a great version of Batman.
Okay.
Matt?
I was going to ask you a question since that's your number 1 pick. Do you think, because when the movie Man of Steel came out, mm-hmm. Christopher Nolan was one of the producers of that mm-hmm. film, and that when that movie came out, we didn't know if that movie existed in the same Nolan verse until they cast Ben Affleck as Batman.
Right.
do you think that that character of Batman could have been played by Ben Affleck or a different actor, and it's still been the Nolanverse if they gone in different routes? Do you think that that's Batman would have worked in the Man of Steel Superman's world?
And the Man of Steel suit, the Christian Bale Batman.
Could the Christian Bale Batman work in? If Batman and Superman didn't come out, do you think that the Christian Bale version of Batman, whether it was played by Christian Bale or a different actor, could have worked in the universe where we now have Superman and Wonder Woman and Flash and Aquaman?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just from what we've seen in other media, I mean, Arrow, for example, starts out with a completely there are no superpowers in this world, and then they introduce Flash and all that in the second season. So, I mean, for sure, just because we didn't see any of that evidence in the movies doesn't mean that it wasn't possible. And I think it probably would have benefited more from a more realistic, younger version of Batman, probably in the current movies.
Yeah, I think that's where, for me, that's where it would have worked. Is it would have added a greater sense of realism to it before you started introducing Aquaman and the like, because the feel that Christian Bale gives off is a sense of realism. You know, his struggle, his reaction, the way, like, when he gets beat up, and you see him with taped ribs and bandages throughout the different movies, his reaction to different things, like his interplay with Alfred, like it's more real than all of its predecessors. And so to me, if you interject him into that world, I think that it works. I also think that, you know, to swing it around to the Superman part, that they made that Superman too dark. If you're going to, and I think that I can see why they went that way, because they had so much success with this grittier version of Batman with Christian Bale. But I think you have to contrast that with the light that is Superman. But instead, they kept it grim, or they kept it dark, which is understandable because it's like, hey, we had success, let's go down the same vein. However, it was always kind of a yin and yang thing with Batman and Superman, to where it needed to have more light. So, but I think that Christian Bale or that version of Batman in that world would definitely work.
Okay. So, sorry to derail, but I thought it was
not
a constructive derail. My number one pick is Michael Keaton as Batman.
Nice.
For the same reasons I think everyone has said this table, and I just remember as a child being very young when that movie came out, and not knowing of a different Batman because of how young I was. And so when I grew up, before Batman Returns came out, I then started seeing the Batman and Robin reruns with Adam West. But I loved that video cassette that I had, and I watched it all the time, and I had the action figures. As far as a cultural phenomenon, I lived in it. That was because I love stuff like that. That was my life. That was real life to me. So I didn't have I wasn't old enough to realize that this was taking over our media, our culture. It was just my life. It was just, Batman is just everywhere. That's just what it is. So I feel like as far as my childhood goes, those early Michael Keaton Batman movies with Batman and Batman Returns really just kind of shaped my appreciation for superheroes. I don't think that I would be into comic books or anything like that if I had not seen those movies. So I feel like that shaped my life. That's why I like those movies so much, and why I like Michael Keaton as Batman.
All right, good one.
So I also picked Michael Keaton as my number one Batman. He probably wasn't my favorite Bruce Wayne, but I think Michael Keaton did a great job as Batman, because he wasn't a guy that was going to sit there and talk to you about anything. He was a quieter, more silent Batman who took care of business, and I think that's why I liked him. He was prepared. He was a bit more cryptic. He was darker. I think that's the way Batman would be. I think he'd want to frighten his enemies, and I think that Michael Keaton did a surprisingly great job as that. When I was a kid, I just loved it because it was Batman. But as I've grown up, I've returned to those movies over and over and over, and I just think he does a great job at being the Batman that he believes Batman would be. better than any of the other actors. It's like there's more of a stark difference between Bruce Wayne and Batman in those movies, which is what I've always thought there would be if it were to happen. I think that his facade would be Bruce Wayne, and he would be the billionaire playboy doing this and that to try to fool everybody, maybe even try to separate himself from this vigilante that's out there, and like, oh, we should hunt this person down or something. Like, he didn't say that in those movies, but he doesn't seem like the type of guy that would necessarily support that. But Batman's just kind of a crazier character. He's darker. He takes care of business. I just thought that the world that he was in was great too, and I think that is largely due to Tim Burton and his vision. But I think that he goes all out, and he does create that larger separation between his version of Bruce Wayne and Batman, and I think that that's why I've always enjoyed him. So Michael Keaton is my number one pick.
Number one for me is Christian Bale. I just think that he did it the best, voice aside and everything else. In the first movie, you got the backstory, and it was believable, and the training in the mountains and the Ra's al Ghul bit and everything else. Like, I mean, I loved it. You know, the train scene and what it is that he was trying to fight, the Scarecrow, and the fact that, yes, he had more movies than everyone else, but the way that they fleshed out the universe, the Batman universe, and incorporated so many different people and so many different aspects of it, even across the lineage of Batman, and combining things from different eras and villains and things like that. That was I thought that was great. You know, the detraction is, you know, kind of the paramilitary bat planes and bat cycles and things like that. But the cycle I can get around. The plane in the third movie, I was just like, yeah, this is a bit much. You know, I kind of wanted something that was more round and, you know, and pointy and looked kind of like an axe if you standed it upright. But you know, again, when you look at all three movies, if you were to whitewash the slate and say, hey, you know, someone who's never seen it, like, which Batman are you going to show them to say, like, here's the character? I'd probably give them this trilogy of movies and say, here we go. And I think, again, it's the reason why everyone was so hypercritical of Ben Affleck and everything else that comes next. And that's why if DC does choose to make a solo movie, it has to be, like, let's say that all of these were three solo home runs. The next Batman movie, whatever it is, however it turns out, has to be a grand slam. You know, I mean, you could say that this was, like, I don't know, it hit for the cycle. I mean, it did everything for me. You know, and the box office even shows it. I mean, the first Batman did really, really well, and I'm sure that if we were to rewind and make a comparable comparison, you know, the Batman was huge in its day, but this version of Batman was just, I mean, to me, it was just absolutely incredible.
All right. I decided to go a different route with my number one, because there are times when I would have said Bale. There were times I would have said Michael Keaton. I decided to go Adam West as my top Batman, because I think, one, let's say a 6 or 7 year old kid says, I want to know what Batman is about. I would probably show him an Adam West show over anything that's, you know, more darker or scary for a young kid. He gets across why Batman is cool without really having to do a lot of things that would be considered dark or scary. But you still get the idea. He's got this cool cape. He's got this cool car. There's Robin. I mean, all the elements that you need for Batman are in that show without having to make it super serious.
Right.
I also think it's probably harder to do than maybe some of the other stuff, because he did a show that played to adults and to kids and was on when there's only 3 networks and was one of the top rated shows. Yep. So you're appealing to a huge amount of the alive population at that time. And even when they kind of tried to do, well, let's see if we can do it silly again with George Clooney, everyone hated it. Yeah. Which to me shows, like, okay, Adam West must have done something kind of right to make everyone like it when he did it that way. And as far as, again, there's a huge cultural impact, because I don't think if you didn't have that show in the 60s, any of the stuff after it would have happened. Even as much as they were trying to go away from it. I think the comics' reaction to it, I mean, they reflected what was in the comics at the time pretty straight up. And then comics said, well, wait, we could take this character more seriously. The fact that they reacted to the Adam West stuff with that stuff lets you have the Michael Keaton Batman, which leads to eventually the Christian Bale Batman.
Right.
I don't think you have any of that with Adam West. I think if you don't have Adam West, nobody believes that Batman's a character that you can make a ton of money on in media. But the fact that they can at least look back and say, well, geez, we made a lot of money on this thing in the 60s. Maybe there's money in there. I think without the Adam West series, no one ever believes that. So I had a lot of reasons to give it to Adam West, and I thought you guys would probably split between Keaton and Bale anyway. So I thought, well, let's throw one back to the old guy and give Adam West the number one Batman, the guy who was Batman. If you look at it a certain way, was Batman longer than anyone else.
Who's the derailer now?
I think it's a fair point. We're ranking Batmans. I'm not suddenly ranking a Supergirl or a Green Lantern.
And he did have his own movie. I mean, he had the Batman movie, so
right, which holds up as a
really fun little romp with a bunch of villains. And I mean, and I agree with your cultural impact, because if you look at some of those old episodes, that vintage thing they do where they're climbing up the wall and somebody opens the window, that's always a pretty big star at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They're like clamoring to get on that show because it's so popular, and it's just for like a little bitty cameo. But it's just it's fun when you look back at it, and it's a timeless little piece.
And anything, for the most part, people who say, okay, what about... I mean, almost any big Batman thing was in that show. Maybe Two-Face wasn't. They were doing the false face thing in 6. They thought it would scare kids. But so many things came from that show. Or you know, why is the Penguin a big Batman villain? Because he was on the show. Right. I mean, that's why a lot of the villains you consider core Batman villains were because they were on that show. So, I mean, they've broken out a few villains since then, but when you look at, like, who's a big deal, and a lot of the times it's because they were a villain on that show. Yep. The Riddler's a much bigger deal because he was on the show. So, anyway, that's why I decided to go with Adam West. I love Michael Keaton, really Christian Bale movies. I loved going to those. I've got no bad things to say about those votes, but I wanted to go a different route and say, hey, let's remember kind of the guy that caused a lot of this to happen would be Adam West. So, final thoughts. We were afraid this was going to be a short episode.
Yeah.
And we went. It's about a double length one. So, anybody have final thoughts before I send a wrap up? Okay.
Do we have like a overall winner that we did? Like, I guess based on number one.
Based on number, well, we 2 votes for Bale and 2 votes for Keaton for number 1. Who had the most number 2 votes?
I thought if we did it that way, I see 2 for Keaton, 2 for Bale.
Keaton's number 1 because
Probably.
He had 3 number 1s and 2 number 2s, and Bale was the other way around. So Keaton came in first. Everyone had the same 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, so if it was like Heisman voting, it would
be Keaton number 1.
Keaton.
I was just curious, so I had to
Keaton
throw that out as
Bale
the final,
2.
one of the final thoughts.
Yeah, if you looked at it like Heisman ballots, I think Michael Keaton would have been our overall victor.
All right.
No one's upset about that, though, right?
No.
I mean, like we would be like throwing chairs at each other if like somehow like Ben Affleck was number 1, and we'd be like, how did this happen?
I wouldn't be mad about that. Now if somehow George Clooney was number 1.
Yeah.
Who voted for George Clooney?
Who was the one guy? Who did that?
Wait, can we roll dice?
Right.
There's a chance he could win.
No.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Who's your favorite Batman? Were we right? Were we wrong? Did we miss somebody entirely? You can tweet at us at Danger Infinite on Twitter, or find us on Facebook, Infinite Danger Room there, or shoot us an email at infinitedangerroom@gmail.com. Feel free to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes. You can also listen to the show via SoundCloud or at newsok.com. For Anthony Brown, Kade Poulson, Matt Howlett, and Chris Borthick, I'm Matthew Price. Thank you for listening.